welcome to this week's live Q&A session here on NZHSP Facebook group. I am going to be your host, Matt Jones, founder of NZHSP, as we unpack ISO 45001 safety management systems. So while people jump on and join us, I am going to do a bit of a experiment with the screen sharing option. I've got a few slides to support today's session, and I am mobile today. You can probably tell by the background on my screen here. I am away from the desk and trying some new technology. So whilst everyone finds their seats, I'm just going to do a quick experiment, and I would love your feedback to let me know if it is working. Best way to do that is just simply give me a thumbs up in the comments box. So I'm just going to do a little bit of playing around, and then I'm going to see if this is going to work for me, and if not, no drama. Is it going to let me share my screen? Yeah, it doesn't look like it is. Oh. Whilst I'm messing around with my settings, introduce yourself, say hello. So in the comments section, let me know if you're tuning in live, where you're located, and yeah, what's going on. So say a quick hello whilst I have a quick play around with my screen, and we'll kick off very, very shortly. Hey Rachel, oh, sunny Hawke's Bay, awesome mate. Sounds like that wind is well and truly past in your region, huh? We got nailed yesterday. It was nuts. Picked up our daughter from a return flight from Tauranga. She was very lucky to get home yesterday. It was insane. Hey Dave, good to see you again, buddy. Glorious Onehunga, lovely part of Auckland. Man, it's gonna kick off down there. Onehunga is just like one of these gem spaces. It's gonna be so beautiful in a few years' time. Okay. Don't think I'm going to be able to share my screen, which is really annoying. Okay, it's not going to work, but that's okay. Okay, team. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to walk you through, like live like this, the presentation that I had planned. So ultimately, what today's session is all about is unpacking ISO. What is ISO? What is it all about? Why do I get excited about ISO 45001? And why Advanced Safety kind of committed to it way back when, back in 2016, when at that point in time, ISO 45001 was still in draft format, and why I still firmly believe it's one of the most important documents in the health and safety toolkit. So for those of you who are logging in live, let me know, are you guys familiar with ISO 45001? Have you had any training with it? Either formally or informally? Have you had any experience implementing health and safety management systems based on ISO 45001? Let me know in the comments, and then I will kick off in today's presentation. Okay, cool. Okay, team. So in terms of ISO, let's just break this down. What the heck is ISO? So the ISO, the International Organization of Standards. Cool, thanks for the insights, Rachel. So you've had some informal experience, implementation, and assessment with ISO 45001. Wicked. How about you, Dave? Have you had any experience with ISO 45001, whether informal or formal training, or the management of health and safety management systems? For those of you who are tuning in on the recording of this session, let us know, one, by putting in a comment replay and then letting us know what your experience is with it as well. So Dave, yep, was introducing it at my last employer. Heaps of ISO systems experience. Love it. Okay, cool. So ISO, the International Organization of Standards. This brings experts together to share knowledge and develop solutions to global problems. This is one of the reasons why I really like it, is it breaks down the artificial barriers or geographical regions and enables subject matter experts and experienced practitioners to share learnings, share experiences well beyond international borders. It means that the systems and the documentation that they recommend, I feel, is more robust than potentially what we can as a nation produce in-house. So ISO standards, they are often described as an agreed way of doing something. And this may come as a surprise to some of you, but there are over 22,000 international standards, some of which have a big impact on our everyday lives. Just for an example, here's, I won't show you the detail and the numbers, but here's one of my bank cards, right? So the size, the shape of my bank card is determined by an international standard, which is aligned to ISO. So it's an ISO recognized standard. It's the same with things like our car seats, the same with our children's car seats. They're all built to a particular standard determined by ISO and ISO frameworks. So, as we all know, within our profession, there is, on an international scale, a serious global problem when it comes to workplace fatalities. So, workplace fatalities on a global scale are estimated to be in excess of 2.7, almost 2.8 million workplace fatalities per year. And failing to address this issue is costing all of us on a global scale in excess of $3 trillion each and every year. So yes, there's the emotional cost of all these fatalities, but also a economical cost for all of us, which it's just shocking ultimately, and it's arguably avoidable if we had smarter systems in place to make our workplaces and our working lives that much safer, right? So this is why ISO finally got around to creating the 45001 standard. It was released in 2018. It's taken all this time to get this framework in place, and I'll speak to some of the previous standards that we used to hang our hats on and what we have currently available to us at the moment. So, is there any surprises, any like whoa aha moments based on what I've mentioned so far? Share your thoughts, your comments in the comments below. I mean, for me, the number of ISO standards that are out there kind of was a bit of a surprise to me. 22,000 ISO standards is crazy. They're not all created the same in terms of the structure or the frameworks in which they follow, and I'm going to speak to that in a moment. Some are really short and brief, some of them are extremely complex. So yeah, any surprises so far, team? Let me know in the comments box. And also in the comments box, we've already mentioned some of your experiences with ISO 45001 in the past. What about some of the other health and safety standards? Have any of you guys that are tuning in live had any experience with perhaps the good old ACC WSMP scheme or Safe Plus or any other health and safety management framework? If you have, what are some of your pain points? What have been some of those experiences that you've had, either good or bad? Feel free to share in the comments. Okay, so why do we have these safe systems of work, and why is this relevant to New Zealand? So the reason why health and safety management frameworks, ISO 45001, is relevant to us. Cool, thank you, Dave. So let's have a look. So you've had experience with the OHSAS 18001, yep, NZHSP HSG 65 and the Safe Plus. Yeah, cool, man. This is great. So, yeah, I mean, the Australian New Zealand Standard 4801, that was pretty much what ACC WSMP scheme loosely aligned itself to. And then obviously we had the Occupational Health and Safety System 18001, which was the British Health and Safety Standard, which was largely adopted on an international scale and was mistakenly considered an ISO standard. It wasn't until 2018 that we finally got a formally recognized ISO 45001 health and safety management standard. Tammy, welcome. It's great to have you here. AEP, but that will be changing to ISO 45001 and Safe Plus. Yeah, that's right. So the AEP scheme is shifting from in-house ACC staff and contractors to do those assessments, and is now moving over to Safe Plus. And also, if businesses have ISO 45001 certification, there's a very quick way of getting that recognition from ACC. Thanks. So the reason why safe systems of work, the reason why I'm even talking about this topic at the moment, is because WorkSafe NZ, the regulator for the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015, requires all PCBUs, businesses and or undertakings, to have a safe system of work. Now, WorkSafe have gone further to support the concept of having a safe system of work that adheres to the plan, the do, the check, and the act process. But what WorkSafe hasn't done, and for obvious reasons when you actually start to think about it, is they have not presented a one-size-fits-all example of what that actually looks like in practice. And for some of those reasons, which includes the risk profile of businesses and undertakings in New Zealand, regardless of shape or size or industry, inevitably each business unit really has its own unique risk profile, therefore requires its own unique control methodology and safe system of work. So it would be foolhardy for the regulator to come out and say, this is exactly how you should administer or go forward with a safe system of work. So instead, they've provided some guidance and guidelines around what good looks like. And it very much speaks to the idea of a safety management system. What that safety management system looks like is up to the business or the undertaking to determine. What I did, almost 10 years ago, was looked at the draft ISO 45001 standard. I really liked it. I could see where it was headed, and so everything that my consultancy produces is aligned to the ISO 45001 framework. So prior to ISO 45001, just like what you've mentioned already, is we had things like the Australian New Zealand Standard 4801, which was, when it was first released, it goes back to 2001, so it was a very dated system, even a few years ago. We had the British Standards OSAS 18001, which goes back to 2007, and things like ACC WSMP. So when the ISO 45001 was released in 2018, it was a bit of a savior in my opinion, because at that point in time we had the introduction of the Health and Safety at Work Act on the 1st of April 2016. Soon thereafter, ACC scrapped the WSMP scheme with very short notice, with very little ceremony, and for a while there we were all kind of scratching our heads as to, okay, what does good look like now? And that's one of the reasons why I jumped onto ISO 45001. I saw it was a bit of a savior, in all honesty. I was working for a state-owned enterprise at that point in time. They were looking for guidance as to what good looked like for them, and that's why another reason why I jumped onto the 45001 bandwagon. I would also, this is my opinion, but I would also argue that, and I appreciate we've got things like Safe Plus, and probably others that I can't think of at the moment. However, I would argue that based on our experience of how ACC scrapped the WSMP in a really short space of time with very little notice, I would argue that it would be more appropriate to recommend to businesses that perhaps have the appetite and the resource to go down the road of ISO 45001 certification to be steered toward that direction if they have the capacity to do it, rather than going down the Safe Plus road. I'm sure there'll be people out there that will be kind of throwing things at their screens at the moment, but to me, that is more foolproof or fail-safe than doing something that is locally designed and administered. I'd love to know your thoughts or comments on that, actually. So if anyone does have any thoughts, if you are throwing things at your screen right now based on what I've just said, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Perhaps we could have some dialogue around that. Okay. So in terms of where the ISO standard fits within the Health and Safety at Work Act, it's really, really important to remind ourselves that the ISO standard does not replace or supersede the Health and Safety at Work Act or any of its regulations for that matter, right? So what it provides us instead is a framework in which to meet our obligations under the Health and Safety at Work Act. So for example, the Health and Safety at Work Act tells us that we must manage risk. There is an international standard, ISO 31000, which gives us a framework for managing risk. So what ISO does is it gives us a structure in which to adhere and to achieve our responsibilities under the Health and Safety at Work Act, but it certainly doesn't supersede or even tell us that we're actually meeting legal requirement, if that makes sense. So just checking, make sure no one's jumped in and thrown anything at me on the screen. No, that's cool. So we've got cool, thank you, Andy. So agreed, if the PCBU is big enough to support ISO, otherwise aligned with WorkSafe frameworks such as AgSafe or Safe Plus as an addition. Yeah, look, I kind of agree with you too. Thank you for your input. Yeah, look, I would certainly agree with that. With many businesses that I support, our team support, we align our health and safety management systems to the ISO 45001 framework, so that even if they don't have the resource or the will or the appetite to go down the road of certification, it at the very least future-proofs their system and their business to, if they ever wanted to endeavor to go down that road, that they've got the pieces in place and they've actually built evidence over time to help support their case. But yeah, I agree. Thank you. All right, team. So with the time we've got left, what I wanted to do briefly, the next time we come together next week, I will have the slides and I'll be less remote and be able to speak to some of the images that I've put together for this talk. But I've mentioned already is that the ISO 45001 is aligned to a process known as the Deming Cycle, which is the plan, the do, the check, and the act. A little bit of a backstory to that. So just after World War II, Japan, for obvious reasons, was in a bit of a disarray. Its industry, manufacturing, infrastructure was in pieces, and members of the car manufacturing industry, such as Toyota and Hyundai and a few others, reached out to Deming, who was based in America, to better understand the systems that were being used to achieve things like what Ford and others had achieved in the US. So Deming went over to Japan and taught the manufacturers in Japan about this thing called the Deming Cycle, which was around the planning, the doing, and the checking and the acting. And in part, this is why we now have household names such as Toyota, Honda, and others, and how they are now outperforming the manufacturing capabilities of the Western competitors, which back in the day were absolutely dominating the market. So I'm just going to really quickly walk through this plan, do, check process. Dave, you've mentioned that Safe Plus is merely an organization culture assessment tool rather than a structured guide to frame up a management system. It doesn't really look at process. Yeah, look, thanks for saying that. Yeah, look, I kind of agree. It's being positioned, I think, as almost like an alternative to, and I'm not sure if that's correct, but I've certainly seen that in some discussions on social, that it's kind of pitching itself along those lines, which I think is a bit of a mistake. Okay, cool. So the plan, do, check, act process. So what the ISO 45001 management system does, and I think it does really, really well, is it helps us to understand the importance of recognizing external and internal stakeholders. So I feel that the previous systems that were in place, the 18001 OSHAS or the NZHSP, didn't really quite capture it quite so well. So what ISO 45001 does is it requires or recommends the users to clearly identify who are their external stakeholders and also who are their internal stakeholders. So external stakeholders could be the regulator, could be the legislation, could also include external parties such as PCBUs who have an influence on your business or undertaking. That could include things like organizations like project management offices. It could include architectural organizations. Could also include upstream duty holders such as the providers of your plant and equipment, all the way down to furniture within the office environment. Internal stakeholders include boards of directors, your senior executive leadership team, CEO, team leaders, all the way down to foremen, forepersons on the construction sites are all internal stakeholders. Each has an influence on the overall structure of the health and safety management system to varying degrees, and it's one of the key documents which I find often missing whenever I'm doing assessments or initial assessments of companies, is having a record of the internal and external stakeholders and the level of influence in which each has on the business or undertaking. The reason why we do this is to help identify the risks and the opportunities that each of these external or internal parties has for the organization. It often identifies the opportunities to have discussions and to have some kind of informal or formal agreement as to how they're going to manage the risks that each shares. So it's a really neat undertaking, and it helps to strengthen the overall capability of the health and safety management system. Next week I'll have some slides and I'll make sure this all fits and it's a little bit more easier to comprehend. But as I mentioned before, we've got the plan, the do, the check, and the act. The very heart of that is leadership and worker participation, which sits firmly in the center of this cycle. So leadership is determined by the director, the owner of the business, or the board of the organization. And then we've got the worker participation. So input from the workers, the worker representatives, and how that all feeds into how health and safety is managed within the organization. Just going to check comments again, make sure all date. Yep, cool. Okay. So the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to break down what plan, do, check, act is all about. So as I mentioned, at the heart of this is leadership and worker participation. So often this is demonstrated with a commitment statement, which is signed and dated by the most senior member of the team, often the CEO or the general manager of an organization. Leadership and worker participation can also be captured within company values, mission statements, or purpose statements. We also often find a record of the participation, representation, and engagement practices. So that might be informal or formal meetings, health and safety committee meetings, for example, or informal discussions, maybe state of the nation meetings, or simply around the water cooler type conversations. It also includes roles and responsibilities of each of those duty holders, as well as minimum training requirements for each of those duty holders within the organization too. Then when we are talking about planning, we're talking about the routine health and safety activities that the organization or the undertaking do, perhaps over an annual period. It includes hazard and risk management practices. How do they identify hazards and risks? How do they document those? How do they control those? And then how do they review them? Planning also includes having a safety improvement plan. So I was having a chat about this with someone yesterday around maintaining a register or a record of all of the safety improvements that are being made or are being currently worked on. So this doesn't necessarily mean all of the health and safety improvement actions, but those actions which perhaps take more time, energy, and resource to achieve. A good kind of benchmark is if it's going to take more than a couple of days to get it over the line, that's the kind of thing that you'd want to have recorded in your safety improvement plan. It's a document that you would then want to build into your agenda. So if there is a health and safety committee, and also if there is a board, perhaps having that key document built into the agenda so that they can then review the safety improvement plan, see what's been achieved since the last session, and what are some of the open outstanding actions, what's on track to be achieved, what's behind, and if anything is lagging, is there any additional resource or action that can be taken to get it over the line. Then we've got doing. So this is all about providing training and resource to your people. Safety equipment, whether that is the low-level stuff like PPE or the higher level stuff in terms of the hierarchy of control, which could be isolation options or even substitution or elimination. The development of standard operating procedures, how we manage our contractors, emergency response planning, health and safety reporting, all sit within that doing section of the health and safety management system. Then we talk about checking. So checking is things like the routine health and safety forums, ensuring that those safety improvements that we've got on our plan are actually tracking and are actually happening. Performance measurements, so ensuring that individual employees' performances are being tracked, maybe on an annual basis as a minimum, and that those performances may have a healthy number of health and safety related questions and criteria built into it. Checking can also include internal assessments, whether that's routine observations, annual reviews, and external assessments from third-party stakeholders. So one of the key duties of the officer, remember, is to verify. So that's the sixth duty of the officer. That includes internal but also external verification, and potentially that's where third-party consultants, I can see there's a few of us online today, come in to assist and to ensure that the organizations are doing what they are required, both morally, ethically, and legally. And then there's acting. So this is when we act on the improvements that have been identified, ensuring that we are continuously improving, and that we are reporting incidents and learning from them. And so that, in a nutshell, is your plan, your do, your check, and your act, with leadership and worker participation at the very heart of the standard. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be breaking this down into a little bit more detail. So I want to kick off by looking at the internal and external stakeholders, which I mentioned earlier on. So next Tuesday at 2 p.m, I'm going to break down exactly what the internal and the external stakeholders are, and also talk about the registers that I mentioned earlier on, to help record those so you can then extract the key information out of that. So look, I know it's a bit of a weird one because I'm not kind of talking to any particular slides that you can see, but this time next week I'll make that a little bit clearer for you. Before I head off and let you guys get back to your busy days, I did just want to remind you that we've got some pretty epic events coming up on the horizon. Where is it? Oh, I've lost my, hold on 2 seconds. Here we go. Okay, so live sessions coming up in the next couple of weeks. So next Tuesday, 2 p.m, I'm going to be delving into the upstream and downstream duty holders with some pretty visuals, right? As part of the unpacking ISO 45001. If this is useful to you, let me know in the comment section. If there's anything in here you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that before, or that's a different way of looking at it, let me know in the comments before we sign off. If you're watching the recording, again, just let us know in the comments. So Northland are having a get-together. This is really great to see. So we're having coffee get-togethers up and down the country, from as far south as Otago, all the way up to Northland. So on Friday the 6th, this Friday at 11 a.m. at the Urban Remedy on One Tree Point, the team are getting together over a coffee. These are free to attend. There's no membership or anything required. Just rock up, have a cup of coffee and hang out with some really, really great people. Cromwell is having a get-together on Tuesday the 17th of October at 10:30 a.m. at Highlands, and Christchurch is also having a get-together on Tuesday the 31st of October at 11 a.m. at Procop Coffee House. Yeah, look, there's loads of stuff going on. I've got there's a brand new podcast, Health and Safety Unplugged, on YouTube and Spotify. Do a quick Google search for Health and Safety Unplugged and you'll see the latest interview with Michael Philpott, who is New Zealand's #1 speaker coach. A really fun interview. He unpacks what great workshop facilitation looks like, how we as participants at conferences should be asking for better quality presenters, and that the organizers of these events should be asking better questions and providing better support for their guest speakers. It's really insightful stuff, and I think it is going to help to raise the bar in terms of the content and in terms of conversations that we as health and safety professionals are going to be having, and what we need to be having in order to push up the quality and standard. Yeah, man, Andy, I'm the same. It is all about coffee catch-ups. Look, there is something on the horizon for Auckland as well. I haven't got the location locked in yet, but this time next month, it's going to be a morning session around about 7:30 a.m. in the Newmarket area. We'll be having a session on a Thursday. Watch this space. I'll confirm the date and the time. Hopefully we can catch up in person. So anyway, guys, bit of a random ad hoc presentation. It looks like I'm in space at the moment, but yeah, next week I'll get the slides up and running and we will unpack the upstream and downstream duty holders. So until then, stay safe, continue being amazing, keep pushing, guys. I'm loving, again, all the content, all the conversations that are taking place on NZHSP. It continues to blow my mind. You're all superstars, and I'll see you all soon. Okay, so take care. See you all.